I'm Olivia Reynolds, 34, and last spring my world imploded in a single phone call. The lakefront home I designed and built over 10 years, pouring my heart and savings into every detail, had been sold without my knowledge. The signature on the documents? Mine. Except I never signed them. When I confronted my parents, my mother's cold words still echo, "You've always wasted money on meaningless things." But they never knew my secret insurance policy. If you're watching this and have ever felt betrayed by family, let me know where you're watching from and hit subscribe. My story might help you protect what's yours. Growing up in suburban Connecticut, I was the reliable daughter in a middle-class family that valued practicality over dreams. My parents, Patricia and Robert Reynolds, provided financially but remained emotionally distant. From my earliest memories, I found solace in drawing floor plans and designing dream houses with colored pencils, while my younger brother Nathan received the lion's share of our parents' attention and praise. "Olivia, stop daydreaming about fancy houses," my mother would say whenever she caught me sketching. "Focus on something practical that will actually pay the bills." Despite their discouragement, my passion for architecture only grew stronger. In high school, I took every available art and design class, and my teachers recognized my talent. When I was accepted to Cornell's architecture program with a partial scholarship, my parents' reaction was lukewarm at best. "College is expensive," my father warned. "Architecture is competitive. Don't get your hopes up." Determined to prove myself, I worked 3 jobs throughout college: morning shifts at a coffee shop, weekend tours at the campus welcome center, and evenings drafting for a local architect. Every penny not spent on tuition and books went into my savings account labeled Dream Home. My roommate Melissa, who later became a real estate attorney, was the only one who truly understood my vision. "You're going to design the most beautiful house someday," she'd encourage me during late-night study sessions. "And I'm going to help you with all the legal paperwork." After graduation, I landed a position at a prestigious architectural firm in Boston. My starting salary wasn't impressive, but I lived frugally in a tiny studio apartment, brought lunch from home, and avoided expensive social outings. Every month, my dream home fund grew slowly but steadily. Meanwhile, my brother Nathan dropped out of 3 different colleges before our parents finally stopped paying his tuition. He drifted between jobs, apartments, and relationships, always needing financial bailouts that my parents readily provided. "Nathan just hasn't found his path yet," my mother would explain. "He's creative, not like you with your structured thinking." During my 5th year at the firm, I received my first significant bonus after bringing in a major client. Instead of upgrading my apartment or wardrobe, I spent weeks researching lakefront properties within driving distance of Boston. That's when I found it: 3 acres on Lake Winnipesaukee with stunning mountain views and crystal-clear water access. The land alone took nearly all my savings, but standing on that shoreline, watching the sunset paint the water gold and crimson, I knew this was where my dream home would stand. I called Melissa immediately. "I found it," I said, my voice shaking with excitement. "It's perfect." When I told my parents about my purchase, my mother scoffed. "Undeveloped land? What a waste of money. You could have put a down payment on a real house in a nice neighborhood." My father shook his head. "Lakefront property means expensive taxes and maintenance. You haven't thought this through, Olivia." For the next 5 years, I lived even more frugally while working with a contractor on weekends to gradually build my lake house. I designed every inch myself: an open-concept main floor with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the water, a stone fireplace built with rocks from the property, custom cabinets in the kitchen, and a wraparound deck where I imagined hosting friends and someday maybe my own family. Every nail, every board, every fixture represented countless overtime hours and sacrificed vacations. The house emerged slowly, a physical manifestation of my determination and vision. When the final touches were completed, I stood in the great room as golden hour light streamed through the western windows, illuminating the space exactly as I had envisioned in my original sketches 10 years earlier. My colleagues at the firm were impressed when I shared photos, and several asked to rent it for weekends, which helped offset some of the maintenance costs. Even my brother Nathan grudgingly admitted it was pretty cool during his one brief visit. Only my parents remained unimpressed. "All that money tied up in a place you only visit occasionally," my mother commented during a rare phone call. "And in the middle of nowhere, too." What they couldn't understand was that the lake house represented more than just a building to me. It was my sanctuary, my achievement, tangible proof that believing in myself had been worth it. On Friday evenings, I would make the 3-hour drive from Boston, feeling the weight of the work week lift from my shoulders with each mile. By Sunday night, after peaceful mornings with coffee on the deck and afternoons sketching by the water, I would return to the city renewed. I never suspected that my sanctuary would become the center of the greatest betrayal of my life. Looking back now, I should have recognized the warning signs: my mother's increasing questions about the property value, my father's sudden interest in my work schedule, and Nathan's financial troubles that seemed to grow more desperate by the month. But hindsight, as they say, is 20/20, and I was too busy living my carefully constructed life to notice the storm gathering on the horizon. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon while I was reviewing blueprints for a commercial project. The office was quiet, most colleagues out for lunch, when my phone buzzed with an unfamiliar local number from the lake area. "Hello," I answered, balancing the phone between my ear and shoulder while marking corrections on the blueprint. "Ms. Reynolds? This is Carol Anderson from next door to your lake house. I wanted to check if everything's okay with the sale. The new owners are moving in today, and they seem like lovely people, but I was surprised you didn't come by to say goodbye." My pencil froze mid-mark. "I'm sorry, what sale?" Carol's confusion matched my own. "The house sale? The Richardson family? They said they bought it from you last month." The room seemed to tilt sideways. "There must be some mistake. I haven't sold my house." "Oh dear," Carol's voice fell. "They're here right now with moving trucks." I just assumed. I thanked her quickly and immediately dialed my parents' number. No answer. I tried my brother. Straight to voicemail. With shaking hands, I called Melissa. "I need to take emergency leave," I told my supervisor, already packing my bag. Family situation. The drive that normally took 3 hours stretched interminably. I called the local police station, but without proof of fraud, they couldn't intervene in what appeared to be a legal property transfer. I left messages for every real estate attorney in my contacts list. 8 grueling hours later, fighting rush hour traffic and road construction, I pulled into my lakefront driveway. Except it wasn't mine anymore. A moving truck stood in the parking area, and unfamiliar furniture filled the great room visible through the windows I had specially ordered from Vermont. A middle-aged man emerged from the front door as I approached. "Can I help you?" "I'm Olivia Reynolds. This is my house." My voice sounded distant, unreal. His friendly expression shifted to concern. "There must be some confusion. We purchased this property from Olivia Reynolds last month. We have all the paperwork. May I see it?" I asked, struggling to maintain composure. His wife joined us, their 2 children peeking curiously from behind her. They seemed like a nice family, excited about their new lake house. The kind of family I had imagined enjoying this place someday. The man retrieved a folder from inside and handed me the closing documents. There was my signature on the lines, but I had never seen these papers before. The notary stamp was from a town near my parents' home. The sale price, $690,000. "This isn't my signature," I said quietly. "I never sold this house." Their faces fell as understanding dawned. The wife pulled her children closer. "We have a power of attorney document," the man said cautiously, pulling another paper from the folder. The power of attorney was dated 6 months earlier, supposedly granting my parents authority to handle my real estate matters. The signature looked remarkably like mine, but with subtle differences only I would notice. The loop in my O was too tight, the final S curled the wrong way. The date coincided with my business trip to Japan for a major project. I had been completely unreachable for 3 days while visiting remote sites. I need to make some calls, I said, backing away. This isn't your fault, but that power of attorney is forged. Back in my car, parked at the public beach access half a mile away, I finally broke down. Sobs racked my body as the magnitude of the betrayal sank in. My parents had stolen my dream, my sanctuary, my achievement. How long had they been planning this? How could they forge my signature so convincingly? I checked into the only motel in town, a dated place with faded floral bedspreads and temperamental plumbing. The front desk clerk gave me a sympathetic look as I requested a room for an indefinite stay. My hands still shook as I called Melissa, now a successful real estate attorney in New York. They forged my signature, Mel. My own parents. Do you have copies of the documents? She asked, her attorney voice taking over. I sent her photos of everything the Richardson family had shown me. While waiting for her assessment, I logged into my bank accounts. No unexpected deposits. Where had the money gone? After an hour on hold with the closing attorney's office, I learned the funds had been wired directly to an account at my parents' bank. When I called the bank, they refused to provide information about an account that wasn't mine. Melissa called back close to midnight. This is serious fraud, Liv. The power of attorney is definitely forged, but it's sophisticated work, not something your parents could have done themselves. The notary is real, but I bet if we investigate, we'll find they never actually saw you sign. What about the Richardsons? They've already moved in. They have children. Melissa sighed. That complicates things. They're innocent purchasers. We could challenge the sale, but it would be a lengthy court battle with no guarantee of success. I stared at the water stain on the motel ceiling. I need to confront my parents first. I need to know why. Sleep eluded me that night as I pieced together what little I knew. The property sold for $690,000, well below market value for waterfront property that had recently appreciated due to limited inventory. The timing during my international trip. The forged power of attorney. All signs pointed to a carefully orchestrated plan. By morning, my sadness had hardened into resolve. I checked out of the motel and began the long drive to my parents' home in Connecticut, rehearsing what I would say when I finally faced the architects of my heartbreak. The familiar suburban neighborhood where I grew up looked exactly the same: neatly trimmed lawns, tasteful landscaping, and the comforting predictability of upper-middle-class security. My parents' colonial-style home, with its fresh blue paint and white trim, appeared as solid and respectable as their reputation in the community. I parked across the street, gathering my courage before approaching the house where I'd spent 18 years of my life. The doorbell chimed the same melody I remembered from childhood. My mother answered, her surprise quickly masked by a practiced smile. "Olivia, what a wonderful surprise. We weren't expecting you." She stepped back to let me in, calling over her shoulder, "Robert, look who's here." My father emerged from his study, his initial smile faltering as he registered my expression. He knew. They both knew. "Let's sit in the living room," my mother suggested, her hostess voice firmly in place. "I'll make some tea." "I didn't come for tea," I said, remaining standing in the entryway. "I came about my lake house." The silence that followed confirmed everything. My mother's face hardened while my father suddenly found the carpet fascinating. "Why don't we discuss this privately?" my mother finally said, gesturing toward the living room. Once seated, I placed the copied documents on the coffee table between us. "The Richardsons seem like nice people. They showed me these. Care to explain?" My father cleared his throat. "Olivia, you need to understand." "Understand what?" I interrupted. "That you forged my signature? That you sold my house without my knowledge or consent? That you stole $690,000 from me?" "Don't be so dramatic," my mother said dismissively. "That house was a financial burden you couldn't afford. We did what was necessary." "Necessary for what?" My voice rose despite my efforts to stay calm. It was paid for. I had no mortgage. My mother's expression turned cold, the mask of pleasantry completely gone. Your brother needed help. Real help, not just another loan to tide him over. He's starting a business venture with real potential this time. So you stole from me to give to Nathan? Again. You've always wasted money on meaningless things, my mother snapped. We need that money to secure your brother's future. The room seemed to close in around me. All those years of sacrifice, of working multiple jobs, of skipping vacations and new clothes and dinners out. All those weekends spent building instead of dating or socializing. All reduced to meaningless things by the woman who should have been proud of my accomplishments. Where's the money? I demanded. My father finally spoke up. It's in a trust for Nathan's business. A restaurant concept with tremendous potential. The location alone. You stole my house for Nathan's fifth business failure? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My brother had previously launched and quickly bankrupted a food truck, a clothing line, a dropshipping website, and a premium dog food delivery service. This is different, my father insisted weakly. He has partners this time, experienced restaurateurs. Where is he? I asked. I want to hear from Nathan himself whether he knows his new business is funded with stolen money. My parents exchanged glances. Nathan doesn't know the details of the financing, my mother admitted. We thought it best to keep things simple. Simple. I laughed bitterly. You mean you didn't tell him you committed felony fraud? That if I pressed charges, you could go to prison? The front door opened before either could respond. Nathan walked in, stopping short when he saw me. Liv? What are you doing here? He looked between our parents and me, sensing the tension. Ask them about your restaurant funding, I said. Nathan's confusion appeared genuine. What about it? Mom and Dad are investing some retirement money. What's going on? Not retirement money, I corrected. They sold my lake house by forging my signature on a power of attorney. The color drained from Nathan's face. What? That's not. I never asked for that. He turned to our parents. Tell me that's not true. My mother stood, smoothing her slacks with an air of finality. We did what was necessary for this family. Olivia has her career and her Boston apartment. She doesn't need a vacation home draining her finances. Nathan needs this opportunity to establish himself. By stealing from your daughter? Nathan's voice cracked. How could you think I'd want that? For the first time, I saw genuine remorse in my father's eyes. We thought we were trying to help both of you. Olivia, the property taxes alone. Save it, I cut him off. I paid those taxes with money I earned. Just like I paid for every board and nail in that house with money I earned. You had no right. We're your parents, my mother said coldly. We've always known what's best for you, even when you couldn't see it yourself. That moment crystallized 34 years of conditional love, of having my achievements diminished while Nathan's failures were excused, of never being quite good enough despite my accomplishments. I'm calling the police, I said, pulling out my phone. Olivia, please, my father begged. We can work this out as a family. We stopped being a family the moment you decided to steal from me, I replied, my finger hovering over the dial button. Nathan stepped between us. Liv, wait. I had no idea about any of this. I'll walk away from the restaurant deal. We'll figure out how to make this right. Looking at my brother's stricken face, I realized he was as much a victim of our parents' manipulations as I was, just in a different way. They had enabled his failures while undermining my successes, creating the very problems they now claimed to be solving. I lowered the phone. I'm not making any decisions right now. But know this, I turned to my parents, I will be pursuing every legal option available to me. And if there's any justice, you'll face consequences for what you've done. I walked out without waiting for their response, my legs barely supporting me to the car. Once inside, with the doors locked, I finally let the tears come again. Not just for the house, but for the family I had always hoped we could be, the approval I had always sought but never received, and the painful recognition that some relationships can't be repaired. As I drove away from my childhood home, I didn't know what would come next. But I knew nothing would ever be the same again. Melissa's law office overlooked Central Park, the Manhattan skyline a stark contrast to the peaceful lake views I had lost. 3 days after the confrontation with my parents, I sat across from her desk, surrounded by the documents we'd gathered. The forgery is sophisticated, Melissa explained, pointing to details on the power of attorney. This wasn't done by amateurs. See how the pressure points on the signature match your authentic one? They likely used a service that specializes in document fabrication. My parents wouldn't know how to find something like that, I said. Melissa nodded. Exactly. We're looking at a coordinated effort involving multiple parties. The notary claims they witnessed you sign, but we can prove you were in Japan that day. The real estate agent rushed the closing process. The title company failed to verify the power of attorney properly. What are my options? I asked, feeling overwhelmed by the legal complexities. We file a police report for forgery and fraud immediately. We notify the title company and the real estate attorneys who handled the closing. We can pursue criminal charges against your parents and civil action against everyone involved in the fraudulent transaction. I thought about the Richardson family, already settled in my dream home. Their children had probably chosen bedrooms, started making friends with neighbors. What happens to the buyers? Melissa's expression softened. That's complicated. Legally, we could petition to void the sale due to fraud, but the Richardsons are innocent purchasers. They believed they were buying the property legitimately. Fighting to take back the house would mean displacing that family and engaging in a lengthy court battle with uncertain results. The thought of another family being victimized because of my parents' actions made me sick. I don't want to put them through that. They have children. There are other approaches, Melissa assured me. We could seek financial restitution instead of the property itself. Your parents, the notary, the title company, possibly even the real estate agents involved, they all have liability here. We spent the next 2 hours filing reports and drafting letters. By the time we finished, my hand cramped from signing affidavits and complaints. What about Nathan? I asked as we wrapped up. He texted me yesterday saying he wants to talk. Be careful, Melissa warned. Family dynamics get complicated in fraud cases. Even if he claims to be on your side now, blood ties run deep. I met Nathan at a coffee shop halfway between Boston and Connecticut. He looked terrible, with dark circles under his eyes and rumpled clothes that suggested he hadn't been sleeping. I had no idea, he said immediately. I swear, Liv, I would never have taken money I knew was stolen from you. Despite everything, I believed him. What happened with the restaurant deal? I walked away, told my partners I couldn't proceed with the funding. They're furious, but... He shrugged. It was dirty money. I couldn't live with myself. Mom and Dad must be thrilled about that. Nathan stared into his untouched coffee. I'm not speaking to them right now. After you left, I confronted them. It got ugly. Dad finally admitted this isn't the first time they've done something like this. My stomach dropped. What do you mean? Remember Grandma Reynolds' antique jewelry collection? The pieces Mom claimed Grandma wanted her to sell for family expenses when we were in high school? Turns out Grandma intended those pieces to be split between you and me when we turned 30. The revelation shouldn't have surprised me, but it did. Our grandmother had passed when I was 16, and I'd always treasured the single pearl necklace I'd received while assuming the rest had been sold, as my mother claimed. There's more, Nathan continued hesitantly. I found receipts in Dad's office from 3 different casinos. I think they have gambling problems they've been hiding. Serious ones. Pieces fell into place. Their frequent weekend trips, the mysterious financial emergencies that sometimes occurred, their persistent interest in my finances despite their apparent financial stability. That's why they needed the money so urgently, I realized. Not just for your restaurant. Nathan nodded miserably. I'm so sorry, Liv. I've been thinking about all the times they gave me money over the years, bailed me out of bad decisions. I wonder now where that money really came from, who else they might have taken advantage of. As we talked, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It was Carol, my former lake house neighbor. Heard what happened. Here if you need a local witness. Also, the Richardsons are nice people. Their daughter has special needs. House perfect for her water therapy. The knowledge that my house was providing a therapeutic environment for a child with special needs solidified my decision not to fight for the property itself. The Richardsons deserved that house more than my parents deserved to get away with fraud. In the weeks that followed, the legal process moved forward with excruciating slowness. My parents hired an expensive attorney who filed motion after motion to delay proceedings. Meanwhile, I threw myself into work, taking on extra projects to distract from the hollow feeling that had taken residence in my chest. Friends tried to help, inviting me to dinners and weekend activities, but I found myself pulling away. How could I explain that my own parents had betrayed me so completely? That the sanctuary I had created for myself was gone? That I now questioned every relationship in my life? Family, friends, and distant relatives began taking sides as news of the legal battle spread. Some expressed shock and support for me, while others suggested I was overreacting to a simple misunderstanding and should forgive my parents for the sake of family harmony. "You always were too sensitive," my mother's sister told me during an unwelcome phone call. "Your parents were only trying to help, Nathan. Isn't family more important than a vacation house?" I stopped answering calls from numbers I didn't recognize. The only bright spot came 6 weeks into the legal process when Melissa called with unexpected news. "Remember when we did the closing on your lake house property 10 years ago? And I insisted you get that special title insurance policy you thought was unnecessary." Vaguely, I admitted. Between the land purchase and construction, there had been countless documents and policies. "Well, I just found it in your files. And Olivia, you're going to want to sit down for this. Owner's title insurance with fraud and forgery protection," Melissa explained as we reviewed the policy in her office the next day. "It's not standard coverage, but I always recommend it to my clients, especially for significant purchases." I vaguely remembered signing off on the additional coverage, thinking it unnecessary but trusting Melissa's judgment. "So, what does this mean exactly?" "It means the insurance company is obligated to compensate you for losses resulting from forgery, fraud, or impersonation related to your title." Melissa couldn't contain her smile. "You're covered for the full market value of the property." For the first time since discovering the theft, I felt a flicker of hope. "They'll pay me the $690,000? Not just the sale price," Melissa corrected. "The current market value. And, because the insurance company will be the one paying you, they'll pursue legal action against all responsible parties to recoup their losses." They have far more resources and leverage than we do as individual plaintiffs. The meeting with Jack Thornton, the insurance company's fraud investigator, took place the following week. He was methodical and thorough, reviewing every document related to the original purchase, the fraudulent sale, and everything in between. "This is one of the clearest cases of title fraud I've seen," he confirmed after several hours. "And frankly, Ms. Reynolds, your documentation is impeccable. Most people don't keep every receipt and record related to their property like you did." My architectural training had instilled in me a nearly obsessive attention to detail and documentation. Every improvement to the lake house, every tax payment, every insurance premium, all meticulously filed and now proving invaluable. "So what happens next?" I asked. "We'll have an independent appraisal done to determine current market value. Then we'll issue payment to you while simultaneously pursuing recovery from the responsible parties." Jack's expression turned serious. "You should know that will include your parents. Our company will press for both civil damages and criminal prosecution." The thought still made my stomach knot, but I nodded. "I understand." Also, Jack added, Checking his notes, standard procedure is to investigate whether this is part of a pattern of behavior. If your parents have committed similar frauds against others, that would strengthen our case. I thought about what Nathan had told me about our grandmother's jewelry and my parents' gambling habits. You might want to look into their casino activities. My brother believes they have gambling problems. Jack made a note. We'll investigate thoroughly. Meanwhile, the appraisal should be completed within 2 weeks. As promised, Nathan had walked away from the restaurant venture, losing his business partners and their respect in the process. He'd taken a job at a friend's landscaping company while figuring out his next steps. We spoke regularly now, our shared trauma creating a stronger bond than we'd had in years. Mom tried to visit me at work today, he told me during one of our calls. I refused to speak to her. Dad's been leaving voicemails saying they can explain everything if I'll just hear them out. Are you going to? I asked. No, Nathan said firmly. They've been manipulating both of us our entire lives. Me by bailing me out and never letting me face consequences, you by dismissing your accomplishments and making you feel inadequate despite your success. I'm done with their games. My parents, realizing the seriousness of their situation as the insurance investigation progressed, began a desperate campaign to get me to drop the matter. They sent emails pleading for family unity. They had their pastor call me appealing to forgiveness. They even showed up at my office in Boston, causing such a scene that security had to escort them out. "You're our daughter," my mother had cried as the security guard led her toward the elevator. How can you do this to your own parents? The question echoed in my mind for days afterward. How could I do this? But the real question was, how could they have done this to me? The answer came unexpectedly during a session with the therapist I'd started seeing to process the betrayal. Your parents violated your boundaries in the most extreme way, she pointed out. They literally stole your property through criminal means. The consequences they're facing aren't something you're doing to them. They're the natural result of what they chose to do to you. The distinction helped ease the guilt that had been plaguing me. I wasn't punishing my parents. I was protecting myself and seeking justice for a serious crime. 2 weeks later, Jack called with news that would change everything again. We've completed our investigation and the property appraisal, he said. Can you come to our office tomorrow? His tone gave nothing away, but something in his careful neutrality made me nervous. Is there a problem with my claim? Not at all, he assured me. But there are some findings you'll want to hear in person. That night, I barely slept, wondering what complications might have arisen. Was the forgery somehow not provable? Had my parents found a loophole? Would the insurance company try to minimize my compensation? The next morning, I arrived at the insurance company offices prepared for a fight. Instead, Jack welcomed me with what almost looked like suppressed excitement. Ms. Reynolds, are you aware that 3 months before your house was sold, the Lake Winnipesaukee area was rezoned for commercial development? I shook my head. I've been focused on a major project at work. I haven't kept up with local zoning changes. Jack slid a document across the desk. According to our appraisal, based on the new commercial zoning and comparable recent sales, your property's current market value is approximately $1.8 million. The room seemed to spin. $1.8 million? Your parents sold a property worth nearly $2 million for less than $700,000, Jack confirmed. They didn't even have it properly appraised before the sale. Either they were completely unaware of the rezoning, or they were in such a hurry to get cash that they didn't bother researching current values. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt my lips curving into a smile. The house I had lovingly built, that represented years of sacrifice and determination, that my parents had dismissed as a wasteful indulgence, had tripled in value under their noses. Our company will be issuing you a check for $1. $8 million, the full current market value, Jack continued. We'll then pursue recovery from all responsible parties, including your parents, the notary who falsified documents, and the title company that failed to properly verify the power of attorney. As the implications sank in, I realized I was actually going to come out of this financially ahead. The betrayal still hurt deeply, but there was a certain poetic justice in the fact that my parents' attempt to steal from me had backfired so spectacularly. "There's one more thing you should know," Jack added. "Your brother contacted us yesterday. He's offered to provide evidence about your parents' gambling activities and previous financial deceptions. That kind of family testimony significantly strengthens our case." Nathan's decision to actively support the case against our parents couldn't have been easy. It represented a final break from the dysfunctional family dynamics that had shaped both our lives. When I called him that evening to thank him, he sounded more at peace than he had in weeks. "It's the right thing to do, Liv. I've spent my whole life letting them clean up my messes. It's time I cleaned up theirs." Meanwhile, my parents had learned about the property's true value and the insurance company's intention to pursue them for the full $1.8 million. Their attorney contacted Melissa, suddenly eager to discuss settlement options. "They're panicking," Melissa told me. "They probably thought worst case, they'd have to return the $690,000 if they got caught. They never imagined being on the hook for nearly $2 million plus legal fees and possible criminal charges." "Do they have that kind of money?" I asked, realizing I had no idea about my parents' true financial situation. "Not even close, according to our financial investigation. They've burned through most of their retirement savings with gambling and bad investments. They do have equity in their house, some investment accounts, and your father's pension, but they'd still be financially ruined." The revelation should have brought satisfaction, but instead, I felt a complicated mix of emotions. These were still the people who had raised me, who had taught me to read, who had attended my college graduation despite their doubts about my chosen field. Their betrayal hadn't erased those memories, just tainted them with the knowledge that their love had always been conditional, their support always contingent on control. As the insurance company prepared its case, the Richardsons reached out through their attorney, horrified to learn they had unknowingly purchased a stolen property. "They want you to know they're heartbroken about the situation," their lawyer explained. "They've offered to vacate the property if that's what you want, though they hope to find a way to stay." Their integrity only confirmed my decision not to reclaim the house itself. That chapter of my life had closed. What mattered now was building something new from the ashes of betrayal. The insurance company moved with surprising efficiency. 6 weeks after my meeting with Jack, a check for $1.8 million was deposited into my account. The amount was staggering, far more than I had ever expected to recover, and more than enough to start a new chapter. "The company will handle all legal proceedings from here," Jack explained during our final meeting. "We'll be pursuing full recovery from all parties involved in the fraud. Your parents, the notary, the title company, and the real estate agents who failed to verify the documentation properly." "What's likely to happen to my parents?" I asked, still conflicted about their fate despite everything. "Based on the evidence we've gathered, including your brother's testimony about their gambling activities and previous financial manipulations, they'll likely face both civil and criminal consequences. Best case for them is significant financial penalties and probation. Worst case could include prison time, especially for your mother, who appears to have been the primary orchestrator." The investigation had revealed that my mother had researched forgery services using the family computer, contacted the notary through a mutual acquaintance, and coordinated the entire sale, while my father played a more passive role. None of this surprised me. My mother had always been the family's decision-maker, with my father following her lead in most matters. Nathan had provided bank statements showing large cash withdrawals coinciding with my parents' weekend getaways to Atlantic City and Foxwoods Casino. He'd also given investigators documentation about our grandmother's jewelry collection that proved our parents had lied about her wishes and sold valuable family heirlooms that should have been passed down to us. "The fraud against you wasn't an isolated incident or a momentary lapse in judgment," Jack concluded. "It was part of a pattern of financial deception that's been going on for years." As the legal machinery moved forward, I focused on rebuilding my life. The first step was finding a place to live that could begin to heal the wound left by losing my lake house. After weeks of searching, I found a spacious apartment in a historic building in Boston's Back Bay neighborhood, with high ceilings, large windows, and architectural details that spoke to my designer's eye. It wasn't waterfront property, but it offered something I needed more at that moment: security. The building had a doorman, secure entry, and was walking distance from my office. I wouldn't have to see my car in the driveway and remember the frantic drive to the lake. I wouldn't have to look at the water and think about what I had lost. Meanwhile, my parents were growing increasingly desperate as the insurance company's case against them progressed. Their attempts to contact me escalated from pleading emails to desperate voicemails. "Olivia, please," my father begged in one message. "We've contacted the Richardsons and offered to buy back the house at a profit for them. We can make this right. Just call off the insurance company." I deleted the message without responding. The Richardsons had already told me they had refused all contact with my parents, having been informed of the fraud by their attorney. My mother took a different approach. "This vendetta will destroy this family," she said coldly in her message. "Is that what you want? To see your parents penniless in their old age? What happened to honoring thy father and mother?" Her attempt to claim moral high ground after committing felony fraud might have been amusing if it weren't so pathetic. 3 months after receiving the insurance payout, I received an unexpected call from the Richardsons' attorney. "My clients would like to speak with you if you're comfortable with that. They have a proposal they'd like to discuss." Curious, I agreed to a video call. The Richardson family appeared on my screen: Michael and Jennifer, along with their 3 children, including 12-year-old Emma, who I learned had cerebral palsy. "We wanted to thank you," Jennifer began, "for not trying to take the house back. When we learned what had happened, we were devastated, both for you and for Emma. The lake access has been life-changing for her therapy." Michael nodded. "We also want you to know that we've made some discoveries about the property that we feel you should be aware of." They explained that shortly after moving in, they'd been approached by a developer interested in purchasing the adjacent lots for a luxury resort. The rezoning that had tripled my property's value was just the beginning. "The developer has offered us $3.2 million for the property," Michael said. "Obviously, given the circumstances, we felt you should know about this." The figure was almost double what the insurance company had paid me, which was already triple what my parents had sold it for. The magnitude of my parents' financial miscalculation was almost incomprehensible. The developer also mentioned they'd approached your parents several times before the sale to us, Jennifer added. "Apparently your mother rejected their offers without even telling you about them." This new information hit me like a physical blow. My parents hadn't just stolen my property. They deliberately sabotaged opportunities for me to sell it legitimately for far more than they'd ultimately gotten for it. The only explanation was that they hadn't wanted me to have the money. They'd wanted to control it themselves. "What are you planning to do about the developer's offer?" I asked the Richardsons. "We're considering it," Michael admitted. "With that kind of money, we could buy a property even better suited for Emma's needs and have funds left over for her long-term care. But we felt wrong making that decision without talking to you first." Their integrity was a stark contrast to my parents' deception. "You should take the offer," I told them. "You have no obligation to me. The insurance company has already compensated me fairly." After ending the call, I contacted Jack to share the new information about the developer and my parents' rejection of their earlier offers. "This strengthens our case considerably," he confirmed. "It proves premeditation and deliberate financial harm beyond the fraud itself." When the news about the developer's interest became public, my parents' remaining supporters fell silent. It was impossible to frame their actions as well-intentioned family intervention when they had deliberately blocked legitimate offers that would have benefited me enormously. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place when Nathan discovered communications between our mother and the notary who had falsified the power of attorney. They weren't just casual acquaintances, as the notary had claimed. They had attended the same gambling addiction support group 2 years earlier. My mother had leveraged that connection and likely the notary's own financial vulnerabilities to facilitate the fraud. With mounting evidence and no viable defense, my parents' attorney advised them to seek a settlement agreement. The insurance company, eager to recoup their $1.8 million payout, was willing to negotiate terms that might keep my parents out of prison in exchange for maximum financial recovery. The proposed settlement would require my parents to sell their home, liquidate all investments except a minimal retirement fund, and forfeit most of my father's pension. They would be left with just enough to rent a modest apartment and cover basic living expenses. The notary and title company would cover the remainder of the insurance company's losses. Before agreeing to the settlement terms, the insurance company consulted me as the victim of the fraud. "We can proceed with criminal charges regardless of the civil settlement," Jack explained. "That decision is technically in the hands of the prosecutor, but your input would carry significant weight." The question of whether to push for my parents to face criminal charges haunted me for days. Part of me wanted them to experience the full consequences of their actions, to feel the same violation and helplessness they had inflicted on me. Another part recoiled at the thought of my mother in a prison jumpsuit, my father's health deteriorating behind bars. I called Nathan, the only person who truly understood the complexity of the situation. "What would you do?" I asked. "I can't answer that for you, Liv," he said after a long pause. "But I can tell you what I've learned from this whole mess. Our parents never really saw us as independent people with our own lives and choices. To them, we were extensions of themselves, resources to be managed. Mom and Dad will never truly understand what they did wrong because they don't recognize our autonomy. Prison won't change that." His insight resonated with a realization that had been forming in my own mind. The greatest punishment for my parents wouldn't be prison. It would be losing control over their finances, their reputation in the community, and most importantly, over Nathan and me. "I don't need them to go to prison," I told Jack the next day. "The financial settlement is enough, as long as it includes no contact orders for both me and my brother." When the final settlement was reached, my parents avoided prison but lost nearly everything else: their home, most of their savings, their standing in the community, and all access to their children. The notary faced criminal charges and lost her license permanently. The title company and real estate agency involved paid significant penalties and implemented new verification procedures. As for the Richardsons, they accepted the developer's offer and purchased a new property specifically designed for accessible living, with features that would benefit Emma's therapy for years to come. They sent me a thank you note with a photo of their daughter smiling in her new therapy pool, a reminder that sometimes good can emerge from even the darkest situations. The irony wasn't lost on me that my wasteful investment, the dream my parents had dismissed and then stolen, had ultimately generated enough value to secure not just my future, but Emma Richardson's as well. My carefully chosen property, lovingly designed house, and meticulous documentation had all combined to transform betrayal into blessing. When the Richardsons' sale to the developer made local news, complete with plans for a luxury eco-resort that would create jobs and tax revenue for the lake community, my professional reputation received an unexpected boost. Colleagues who had admired my architectural work now also recognized my investment savvy. My firm offered me a partnership track, acknowledging that my personal design aesthetic had appreciated in the real estate market by 400% in 10 years. As the legal proceedings finally concluded, I found myself in an entirely different life than I had planned: wealthier, wiser, and unexpectedly free from the need for parental approval that had unconsciously driven so many of my choices. The lake house was gone, but what it had given me was far more valuable than property: financial security, professional recognition, and most importantly, the clear-eyed understanding that I had built something of tremendous value, entirely on my own. 6 months after receiving the insurance settlement, I stood in the center of my newly renovated Back Bay apartment. The space reflected everything I had learned from my lake house experience, but with a distinctly urban sophistication. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Charles River, providing a different kind of water view than the one I had lost. The $1.8 million insurance payout, wisely invested with the help of a fiduciary financial advisor, had set me on a path to financial independence I had never imagined possible in my 30s. My new home was my sanctuary, but unlike the lake house, it didn't represent years of sacrifice and struggle. Instead, it symbolized resilience and new beginnings. The healing process hadn't been linear. Some days I still woke up reaching for my lake house keys, momentarily forgetting they would never open that door again. Other days, the sense of betrayal felt so fresh it took my breath away. But increasingly, those moments were outnumbered by days of peace and forward momentum. Therapy had been essential to my recovery. Family betrayal cuts deeper than almost any other kind, my therapist explained during one session. The people who were supposed to protect you caused deliberate harm instead. That violation of the most fundamental trust requires serious processing. Processing meant acknowledging not just the loss of my property, but the painful recognition that my parents had never truly supported my independence or celebrated my achievements. The lake house theft was merely the most extreme expression of a lifelong pattern of control and dismissal. Your parents saw your resources as family resources they had a right to allocate, my therapist observed. But they didn't extend you the same consideration when it came to their decisions or Nathan's needs. The insight helped me understand why the betrayal had happened, though it didn't excuse it. My parents' actions were born from a fundamentally flawed perspective about family relationships and boundaries, compounded by gambling addiction and financial desperation. Nathan had gone through his own parallel journey of healing and self-discovery. After years of false starts and failed ventures enabled by our parents, he had finally found stable footing working for a landscape design company. His natural creativity, freed from our parents' suffocating expectations, had flourished in the outdoor environment. 3 months after the settlement, I had used a portion of my insurance money to help Nathan start a legitimate business, a garden center specializing in native plants and sustainable landscaping. The investment was structured as a proper business loan with clear terms, professional documentation, and a solid business plan developed with guidance from a small business advisor. This isn't a handout, I had told him firmly. It's an investment in a viable business. I believe in your vision and your ability to make this work. The distinction was important to both of us. Unlike our parents' approach of enabling dependence while claiming to help, my support came with appropriate boundaries and expectations. Nathan had embraced the responsibility, working tirelessly to make the business succeed and making every loan payment on time. As for my parents, I had maintained the no-contact order established in the settlement. They had moved to a small apartment in a neighboring state, their reduced circumstances a daily reminder of the consequences of their actions. According to Nathan, who received occasional updates from distant relatives, our mother had finally sought treatment for gambling addiction, while our father had taken a part-time job to supplement their limited remaining income. Some family members had pressured me to reconcile, invoking religious principles of forgiveness and family unity. "They're still your parents," my aunt had insisted during one unwelcome call. "They made a terrible mistake, but surely you can find it in your heart to forgive them." What these well-meaning relatives failed to understand was that forgiveness didn't necessitate reconciliation. I could release the consuming anger and bitterness without exposing myself to further harm from people who had shown no genuine remorse or understanding of the damage they had caused. Forgiveness is an internal process that benefits you, not an external action that benefits them, my therapist had explained. You can forgive without restoring trust that hasn't been earned. That distinction had been liberating. I could wish my parents well in their recovery without allowing them back into my life. I could hope they found peace without making myself vulnerable to their dysfunction. The most unexpected aspect of my healing journey had been discovering a community of others rebuilding after betrayal. Through a support group recommended by my therapist, I met people who had experienced similar violations of trust by family members, partners, or close friends. Their stories helped normalize my experience and provided practical strategies for rebuilding. The hardest part was learning to trust again, shared one woman whose business partner had embezzled their company funds. Not just trusting others, but trusting my own judgment after it had been so catastrophically wrong. I recognized that same struggle in myself. If I had misread my own parents so completely, how could I trust my perceptions of anyone else? The question had initially paralyzed me, making me withdraw from friendships and potential relationships. The breakthrough came when I realized that trusting wisely didn't mean never being hurt again. It meant creating appropriate boundaries, paying attention to red flags I might have previously ignored, and building relationships gradually rather than assuming unconditional trust from the start. 6 months after the settlement, I took a major step in my professional life, leveraging my experience to launch a side business consulting on secure property investments and fraud prevention. My story, shared carefully in professional contexts, had resonated with many who feared similar vulnerabilities in their own arrangements. "You turned a devastating loss into valuable expertise," my firm's senior partner observed. That's the definition of resilience. The consulting work led to speaking engagements at real estate investment conferences, where I shared practical steps for protecting property from fraud. Each presentation helped transform my narrative from victim to expert, from someone who had lost everything to someone whose experience could help others protect what mattered to them. Meanwhile, I had begun sketching plans for a new vacation property, this one in the mountains rather than by a lake. The design incorporated everything I had loved about my previous home, but with sophisticated security measures and legal protections that reflected my hard-won wisdom. This new project wasn't about replacing what was lost, but about reclaiming the joy of creation that had always centered me. Each line I drew represented a step away from betrayal and toward a future shaped by my own choices rather than reactions to the past. As the 1-year anniversary of discovering the theft approached, I decided to mark the date not with mourning, but with celebration of how far I had come. I invited a small group of friends who had supported me through the ordeal to dinner at my apartment. "A year ago, I thought I had lost everything that mattered," I told them as we raised our glasses. "What I've learned since then is that what matters can never really be taken from you. My creativity, my resilience, my capacity to build something beautiful, those are the real assets, and they've only grown stronger through this challenge." The gathering represented everything my parents had never understood about true wealth, that meaningful connections and personal growth far outvalued any property or bank account. The people around my table had shown me what genuine support looked like, celebrating my successes without trying to control them and standing by me through failure without using it to diminish me. Later that evening, after my guests had departed, I stood on my balcony watching the city lights reflect on the river. The pain hadn't disappeared entirely. Betrayal leaves scars that never completely fade. But I had built something new and valuable from the ashes of that betrayal, boundaries that protected without isolating, wisdom that informed without paralyzing, and a self-reliance that empowered without hardening. The lake house had been my dream, my sanctuary, my achievement. Losing it had taught me that I was capable of building new dreams, finding sanctuary within myself, and achieving things I had never imagined possible. The property was gone, but what it had truly represented, my capacity to envision and create beauty, remained undiminished. As I turned to go inside, I caught sight of my reflection in the window glass. The woman looking back at me was stronger than the one who had first learned of her parents' betrayal a year earlier. She knew her worth wasn't determined by others' recognition. She understood that family is defined by respect and support, not merely by blood. And most importantly, she recognized that the greatest security comes not from what you own, but from who you become through life's most challenging moments. If you've ever experienced betrayal by someone you trusted completely, I hope my story helps you recognize that healing is possible. The path forward isn't about forgetting what happened, but about integrating it into a larger narrative of growth and resilience. Have you ever had to rebuild trust after a significant betrayal? Share your experience in the comments below. And if my story resonated with you, please subscribe and hit the like button to help others find this message of hope. Remember, sometimes the greatest blessings come disguised as our deepest wounds. Thank you for listening, and may you find strength in your own journey of healing.